conference this morning, even though we received legal threats and an official letter yesterday at 3 o'clock demanding that we cancel this media conference. That letter we received from the legal team of Mr. Fikile Mbalula. It shows a bit of panic. On a lighter note, you would know that Mr. Mbalula loved to call himself on his social media handle Mr. Fear. Okay, I'm not going to say the word because this is AfriForum TV, where this is also broadcast. Is a family channel. But he said he fears nothing. But of course, the legal letter shows somebody that is very fearful. It says that we should not make any allegations, but we feel confident that it is in the public interest, that it is AfriForum's job to make sure that we shine a light on things that what we believe are not correct. That demand was sent yesterday, as I've mentioned, 3 o'clock. We had to answer by 4 o'clock within an hour. We then simply answered that we are not going to adhere to the demand and we are going ahead, and you're seeing now we are doing it. Our legal team was on standby last night to take action if there was any effort to interdict us from going ahead. But here we are today. Just with regard to the two parts and what we are asking that Mr. Fikile Mbalula should be held accountable, locally as well as internationally. Locally, we believe nobody is above the law. We believe in the rule of law. And that is exactly why we formed a few years ago the AfriForum Private Prosecution Unit. And we were fortunate to get a great team under the leadership of Advocate Harry Nell. And our whole team consists of those people that successfully prosecuted the late former police commissioner Jackie Selebi. And the reason why we had to do this is because we've seen in the National Prosecuting Authority over many years political interference that prevented people in high positions with political connections from being prosecuted. And that is the work we are doing. So today you will hear, in that regard, remember our prosecution unit focuses simply on the rule of law, on legal issues, on corruption issues, and are not part of a broader political scheme. Then with regard to our international campaign, as I've said, Ernst will give you some statements that was made by Mr. Mbalula. At the moment, AfriForum and the Solidarity Movement are working very hard to try and solve the conflict with the US. That's why we were in the US to ask, do not punish South Africa if you are angry with ANC politicians. And in that regard, we believe that we have made progress. But for some reason, Mr. Mbalula thinks it's a good idea to try and sabotage this process. It is actually not very clever. While you are in negotiations to solve a problem, for Mr. Mbalula to come and say over the last week or two that the US ambassador is drunk, that he's a racist, and make all those remarks, that is somebody that does not want to promote the interests of this country and the people of this country. It's a selfish attitude where he wants to promote his own ambitions to become the ANC leader. He wants to promote short-term gains with regard to the upcoming election for the ANC. And he simply does not care what happens to the country and the country's people. We know that punitive measures and economic sanctions will make the joblessness situation worse in the country. We will see growing poverty in the country. And it seems like Mr. Mbalula would just then go ahead. He loves posting photographs of himself with his designer clothes. You cannot, on the one hand, have somebody living in luxury, wearing designer clothes, and then doing things that will harm the normal people in this country. And that is why this dossier will also be used to tell the US and other countries that want to take punitive measures against the country, do not act against the country. If you want to act against people like Mr. Mbalula. And in the US, they have the Magnitsky Act, which allows for individual sanctions. And this dossier, we believe, would help to rather get this alternative. We do this out of loyalty to South Africa to prevent punitive action against the country. That is my introduction. Maybe the members of the media can give me some guidance. Should we play musical chairs and let Aaron sit this side, then we don't have to move all this stuff. Okay. Okay, you can expropriate my seat without any compensation.
Good morning. Thank you very much for coming here to report on this breaking news. This news that I firstly want to intro by waving to Mr. Mbalula, who is definitely not only himself tuning in, but also his army of lawyers that he rushed to appoint yesterday before he even knew what AfriForum was going to say. It seems like he had a feeling in his gut it was going to be substantial. And we have a saying in Afrikaans that goes, desperate katte maak desperate spronge. And I think in English I can translate it to, desperate cadres make very desperate jumps. And that's what we've been seeing for the past 24 hours. Not a man that's cool, calm and collected, but a man that's jumping from left to right, making tweets, deleting tweets, posting more, making more posts, deleting more posts, not being sure about what to say, thinking this is the right thing to say, then erasing it, saying, oh, that's not the right thing to say. That's panic behavior. That's not cool as a cucumber behavior. And I've got some bad news, unfortunately, for Mr. Mbalula. He likes to say the line of, we will not be bullied. Unfortunately, disclaimer, there will be bullying today. Bullying with the truth, bullying using the facts, not bullying using falsehoods. Because when you hit AfriForum with falsehoods, we hit back with the truth. And that's what will be happening here today. But firstly, who is Mr. Fikile Mbalula? I think that's the question that needs to be answered first. Not what is he most famous for, but what is he most infamous for? Is it the fact that every government department that he touches, he demonstrates a reverse Midas touch, that everything he touches turns to dysfunction and failure? Is that what he is most infamous for? Is it the trail of corruption and criminality allegations that follow him wherever he goes? Is it the gross displays of personal wealth while his people die, the children of his people die in pit toilets? Is that the most infamous thing about Mr. Mbalula? Is it how he tries to sabotage and destroy South Africa's diplomatic relationship with key trading partners like the United States? Or is it the racist hatred he appears to hold for the white citizens of his country, particularly Afrikaners, a hatred that drips from every ranting and raving speech that he has been doing for the past few months and beyond, filled with falsehoods and disinformation? You decide what is the most defining characteristic of Mr. Mbalula, and after reading AfriForum's report, you will have an even clearer view. Let's start off firstly with a rotten record. During his tenure as Minister of Police from 2017 to 2018, we saw the number of murders in South Africa increase sharply, the largest single year jump in over a decade and the largest total in 10 years. Under Mbalula, we also saw an increase in the amount of attempted murders as well as the amount of rapes. During this time, we also saw a dramatic increase in cash and transit heists as well as stock theft. As Minister of Transport between 2019 and 2023, Mbalula oversaw the collapse of passenger rail transport in trips in South Africa. This declined from about 209 million trips in 2019 to just 39 million trips in 2023. Total freight transported by rail fell by about 25 to 30% under Mbalula's watch as Minister of Transport, and logistics failures in terms of rail and ports cost the South African economy an estimated 500 billion rand in 2022 alone, which is more than 7% of GDP. Transnet also suffered heavy losses during this time, and ports managed by Transnet ranked among the world's worst during Mbalula's tenure. And now, under his watch as ANC Secretary General, it also appears that this reverse Midas touch has followed him. It was reported that the ANC now ranks as the 16th most corrupt organization in the world. This happened under Mbalula's watch. Congratulations, Fikile. It appears you've helped the ANC reach the final 16 of the Corruption Champions League. I hear the penalty shootouts are quite hectic. But now let's get to the policy extremism that we have seen from Mr. Mbalula and his cadres for the past few months, and especially in 2025. When it comes to policies, Mbalula is undeniably an extremist. At a 2026 rally, Mbalula reiterated the ANC's commitment to expropriation without compensation, and stated that the ANC also intends to push for more extreme policies, such as the nationalizing of the Reserve Bank. Fikile Mbalula has voiced his support and justification for the violent land confiscations of Zimbabwean dictator Robert Mugabe, who Mr. Mbalula considers a hero. In 2022, Mbalula blamed the economic crisis in Zimbabwe on US and UK sanctions, which exclusively targeted corrupt politicians, not the country as a whole, rather than the destructive policies of ZANU-PF, who him and his cadres love so much. Mbalula also blamed the UK for the horrific events that happened under Mugabe in Zimbabwe, when he said the British had failed to honor what they had promised ZANU-PF, and therefore, in his words, Robert Mugabe had no choice but to embark on a violent revolution. Ramaphosa echoed his ANC comrades' extreme sentiments in 2025. Speaking at an agricultural show in Zimbabwe, President Ramaphosa heaped praise on ZANU-PF's policies, labeling the dictator Robert Mugabe's violent land confiscations as, in his words, ambitious and essential. He emphasized that the South African government seeks to copy ZANU-PF's policies so that South Africa can become more like Zimbabwe, a sentiment that Mbalula seems to share. The Mugabe regime's land policies of the early 2000s being referred to here by Ramaphosa and by Mbalula involved chaotic and often violent land invasions and seizures. Private property rights were severely violated when these policies resulted in thousands of white farmers and their families literally being chased off their land, attacked, and even tortured and murdered. Mugabe's fast-track land reform program resulted in mass human rights violations and the collapse of the Zimbabwean agricultural sector and economy. This caused millions of Zimbabweans to swim across crocodile-infested rivers to flee ZANU-PF's utopia to South Africa. Mbalula has expressed his and the ANC's support multiple times for regimes with horrific human rights records, such as the ones in Cuba, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, North Korea, and Iran. In 2023, an ANC delegation of which Mbalula formed part held a meeting with the terrorist organization Hamas at the ANC's headquarters in Johannesburg. After the meeting, the ANC issued a media statement quoting Mbalula when he said, "The meeting underscored the paramount importance of unity among Palestinian organizations such as the Fatah movement and Hamas in their collective struggle against occupation and collective struggle against occupation and for self-determination." This is a man who praises a terrorist organization responsible for thousands of deaths and tortures. In 2024, Mbalula stated on X that, in his words, "We remain forever inspired by Fidel Castro's fearless, radical, and revolutionary struggle against the brutal system of capitalism." At a media briefing in 2023, Mbalula once again showed his extremist views when he defended Naledi Pandor, then Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, after her contact with the terrorist organization Hamas. Mbalula stated, "She has been insulted left and right. There's nothing wrong with what she is doing." What he's talking about is a representative of the South African government meeting with a terrorist organization, something that Mbalula thinks is a fantastic thing. Next is the sabotaging of diplomacy. In 2025, Mbalula described the decision by the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio to decline attending the G20 summit in South Africa as shameful and accused the US of cowardly diplomacy. Speaking at a conference in 2025, Mbalula accused the US of displaying, in his words, fascist characteristics and reinforcing outdated racist ideologies. He continued stating that the geopolitical landscape is currently undergoing, in his words, enormous shifts with the rise of ultra-right governments driven by fascist ideologies, end quote. And in a media briefing in 2025, Mbalula dared the US to bring on sanctions, in his words. He reiterated that the ANC will not abandon its racially discriminatory policies even under threat of South Africa being sanctioned. In March 2026, Mbalula accused without evidence the new United States ambassador to South Africa, Brent Bozell, of attending a meeting with the ANC while drunk. No evidence provided, just a slanderous lie. My standards of what it means to do everything in your power to repair a diplomatic crisis very clearly differ wildly from what Mr. Mbalula sees as doing everything you can to repair a diplomatic crisis. Accusing the person on the other side of the table during negotiations to defuse a diplomatic crisis of being drunk at the meeting is not how you defuse that crisis. Mbalula clearly holds anti-white views. When referring to the Afrikaner refugees to the United States, Mbalula falsely claimed in 2025 that within a week the refugees that landed in the US started killing each other. That is his words. No proof, no basis for this claim. He just thought it up, it seems. He continues by claiming that killing each other and black people en masse is typical behavior of white South Africans. Is that the stance of someone who stands for the truth, who does not hold hatred for a racial group based on their skin color? Mbalula said, talking about white South Africans, this is what they do, killing each other and black people. Is that something that a non-extremist does, slandering an entire racial group as bloodthirsty murderers? He also dismissed the Afrikaner refugees, some of whom fled after surviving multiple farm attacks, as car guards. In 2026, Mbalula once again falsely labeled the Afrikaner refugees to the United States as car guards and blatantly lied that they were now returning to South Africa en masse. Fikile Mbalula never misses an opportunity to express the hatred he clearly holds for white South Africans, the citizens of his country, especially Afrikaners. This hatred is most often expressed by spewing blatant lies and falsehoods that he appears to have just seen on social media and gobbled up uncritically. No evidence is ever provided, just slanderous lies based on his own racial prejudices. What needs to also be emphasized is the fact that Mr. Mbalula is very clearly a serial liar when it comes to spreading lies to try and not just destroy, but also completely defame anyone that tries to criticize him or anyone that seems to just be someone that he does not like. Mr. Mbalula accused a principal of raping a child, if you remember the Justice for Kwekwe scandal on social media, claims that have been completely debunked, shown to be complete falsehoods. He also called this principal an animal, dehumanizing him to the fullest extent, saying that this is not what a human being does. That is why AfriForum has opened a crimen injuria case to ensure, against Mr. Mbalula, to ensure that he faces justice. But also there's a civil case against him as well for these defamatory lies that he has, these crimen injuria lies that he has spread against innocent people. What we have here is a serial liar that lies without a conscience, will destroy anyone if it ensures that it will help him hold on to power and achieve his agenda, even if those people are completely innocent. Where there is smoke, there is fire. And currently there are massive smoke signals above Mr. Mbalula's activities and conduct. AfriForum will ensure that this information is passed on to the relevant people and authorities and ensure that the truth and justice prevails in this case and that Fikile Mbalula is held accountable. And I can look straight into the camera and address Mr. Mbalula directly. Justice will prevail. Your intimidation tactics have failed, and prepare to face justice. I've got a very good team behind me alongside AfriForum and our private prosecution unit to ensure that justice prevails. And that's why AfriForum's private prosecution unit exists in the first place, to take on politicians specifically who believe that they are above the law because they have been getting away with so much for so long. And that's why I also just want to use the opportunity to thank all AfriForum's members that make the private prosecution unit and all of our campaigns possible, that make the things like the Mbalula files, the Mbalula dossier possible, which are now going to be released today. Thank you very much to our members that make that possible. And if you're not a member yet, I do encourage you to become a member today to make more of this fight for the truth possible. And now I'm going to give the floor over to Mr. Harry Nell, who is the head of AfriForum's private prosecution unit, to give you more details on the corruption side of this dossier.
Good morning. If I look around the room, I'm sure you're too young to know Monty Python sketches. But in terms of Monty Python sketch, now for something completely different. Today there's 12 policemen appearing in court. So I really hope we see a new dawn. I think Mr. Mothibe was on TV this morning saying that the NPA will now act quickly and decisively against criminals, and really we comment him on that, and we hope it happens, and we will cooperate as far as we can. But it seems that in the criminal justice system, you achieve nothing if you don't have a press conference, and specifically if you're surrounded by armed policemen in battle fatigue. We don't have armed policemen in battle fatigue, but we're also complaining about the inefficiency of the criminal justice system. We're here today because of normal human behavior. It's just natural for any person to avoid a difficult decision. It's just natural for any individual to avoid those tasks you don't want to do, but you have to do it because you were told to do it. It's just natural to ignore those tasks that you cannot do and that you refuse to do, or we're here just because of plain incompetence by people that have to take decisions. Perhaps most importantly, we of the view that the NPA act in the way they do just because they hope we will go away, that we'll just go away. In South Africa, and you all know it better than I do, there are new allegations every day. Every day there's something new, then we have to deal with something new. We're dealing with the Mdlanga Commission at the moment. We've forgotten about the Zondo Commission. We've forgotten about allegations about current ministers in the cabinet, about corruption allegations against current ministers. So there's always something new, and what happens is that people go away. But we're not going away, not as far as this matter is concerned. I'll deal with it later, but we wrote a letter to Advocate Mothibe earlier this week, complaining about what's happening in the NPA, indicating that they've taken irrational decisions, indicating that the decisions is just to protect politicians against prosecution. He now in turn referred it back to the person that took the decision in the first instance, the person that we think acted irrationally. He referred it back to him. We really hope that Mr. Mothibe will get involved and deal with our letter. What we're dealing with today, and the Mbalula investigation as far as the Dubai holiday is concerned, is a perfect storm. There's a deficient investigation, and there's a NPA acting on a deficient case docket. So the police, if you confront the police, would say, we handed over our case docket to the NPA, ask them. The NPA will say, we received the case docket, there's very little in it, so we can't take a decision. But there's no prosecutor-directed investigation that Mr. Mutibe spoke about this morning. Mr. Mutibe, this morning on TV, spoke about prosecutor-directed investigation. Now, just to make sure, and I'll deal with all the facts now, just to make sure that nobody thinks that we're dealing with a knee-jerk reaction, that we now decided that it's time to deal with this matter, and it's time to deal with this matter decisively. I have to just tell you that our first letter to the NPA about this matter was on 10th of March 2022. We received no cooperation from the NPA. We went so far as to complain about the inefficiency of the Hawks and the NPA in this investigation of this matter to the President. We wrote a letter to the Presidency in June 2022. We wrote lots of letters in this matter. So it's not something that we decided that we want to deal with this week, that we want to deal with now. We've been dealing with this matter over a very long period of time. Now let me just give you the history of what we're dealing with. Now, we all know we're dealing with a holiday that Mr. Mbalula took to Dubai. We know it, it's not a secret, it was admitted. This holiday was between 28 December 2016 and 3 January 2017. He was then Minister of Sport. We all know, and it's also contained in the case docket, that the cost of that holiday was 684,000 rand, thereabouts. We all know that no payment was made, and that the travel agency then demanded payment in February 2017. It's in the case docket that in February 2017, Sedgers, through a company linked to Sedgers, made the 300,000 rand payment by means of EFT to the travel agent. We also know that there were cash deposits of 300,000 rand more, cash deposits into the account of the travel agent, and we also know that there was a further 85,000 rand cash deposit at OR Tambo into the account of the travel agent. So that happened. That happened in February 2017 and months and days following that. What we also know is that on 9th October 2017, Eyewitness News published a report about Mr. Fikile's holiday, and saying in the report, they said that Sedgers paid for his holiday. The strangest things happen. On that same day that Eyewitness News made the report, Mr. Mbalula started paying back. He paid back Sedgers through the company that they used on the same day. So that's in October, after the holiday that ended in January and after the money received in February. So he decided to pay that back. On that same day, AfriForum, through Monique Tata, referred the matter to the Public Protector. So the Public Protector dealt with the matter, and at the hearing at the Public Protector, on behalf of Mr. Mbalula, through his lawyers, they indicated that the money received was a loan. It was a loan, and that he paid it back. On 19 December 2019, the Public Protector made a finding. The Public Protector made a finding, and she referred the matter back to the NPA to investigate money laundering. Now, obviously, that never happened. The NPA took absolutely no further steps, and that caused the same Monique Tata to register a case docket in August 2019. Now, a timeline in this matter is really important. So in 2019, case docket is opened. That case docket was then nolly prosecuted on the 3rd of August 2023. So, and the letter we received, Mr. Mzinyati of the NPA indicated that there's no evidence supporting allegations of corruption because there was no quid pro quo, and that this was merely a loan and that the loan was paid back. So those were the reasons given for the failure to prosecute. We dealt with those reasons. We dealt with those reasons in a comprehensive representation to the National prosecuting authority, on the 2nd of October 2025. We wrote to them indicating that there's a deliberate misunderstanding of the definition of corruption, that there was a deliberate failure to ensure that there's a completed investigation. We dealt with, we even in our letter of October 25 furnished them with a draft charge sheet, saying that they could use this draft charge sheet because when we received the case docket, we found the draft charge sheet drafted by a prosecutor of the MPA in the case docket. Now, a prosecutor would only draft the charge sheet if that prosecutor thought that it's a matter that should be prosecuted. So there was a draft charge sheet in that case docket, but there was no prosecutor. So it's now 6 months later. We haven't received a response on our representations of 2 October 2025. But then something else happened. A new national director was appointed. The new national director made a public pronouncement on the 12th of March 2026, and we thought, well, perhaps let's try again. Let's take him on his word. What he said during this press briefing, he said, South Africa is one of the few countries that prosecute former ministers for corruption. We thought about it, and the word former struck us. So former ministers would be prosecuted, former officials would be prosecuted, not those currently in the cabinet, also not those who are currently in certain positions. And just think of the allegations against current ministers in the cabinet that's not been pursued. Think of the Zondo Commission's recommendations that were not dealt with. So on the 11th of March, something else happened. On the 11th of March, in the Mbalula Commission, the following happened. In the Mbalula Commission, Mr. Shibiri, Major General Shibiri, gave evidence. He gave evidence about a 70,000 rand loan he received from Mr. Mbalula. He received the loan because he wanted to service his child's car. Now, what's important is the word loan. Now, he was taken on by saying, but how can this be a loan? Isn't it sheltered as a loan? And everything that was said in the Mbalula Commission, in the interaction between the Judge Mbalula and the witness, is a mirror image of what we're dealing with here. In the Mbalula Commission, they put it to Mr. Shibiri, you only paid back once the police raided your place. Then you decided, let us pay this back. We say the first payment in this particular matter was after the news broke on Eyewitness News. That should be investigated. So our whole approach is, we're approaching the MPA, we're saying to the MPA that your decision not to prosecute, because we now have the case docket, is irrational and it's not in terms of the law. It's a deliberate misunderstanding of the definition of corruption. The definition of corruption was established and accepted by the Supreme Court of Appeal by NPA prosecutors in the Celebe matter and the Block matter. It was the NPA prosecutors that argued in terms of the definition of corruption that we think should be applied daily. The definition of corruption is so easy. It's if you ask for or receive or pay a benefit, which creates a dynamic whereby you'll be indebted to somebody to do him favors forever. That's it. There's no indication of a quid pro quo that there must be a quid pro quo. The understanding of a quid pro quo is because we understand the crime of bribery. In terms of bribery, you have to pay money and get something for it. In terms of corruption, in terms of the Celebe matter, the definition was settled and it was just so easy. We see lots of people having lots of discussions about corruption, and all we say is just apply the correct definition of corruption. So we say it mirrors the the Mdlanga issue, and there we indicate, and you all have our letter. If I can just refer you to our letter, paragraphs 19 and 20. Now that makes it clear. In paragraph 19 and 20, the following, we refer to what was said by Judge Mdlanga to General Shibiri, where he said, I suggest to you that once there were these raids, you saw the police were catching on to Mr. Matlala, and you decided that money that had been paid to you, not as a loan, I suggest, you should now suddenly pay back to Mr. Matlala so as to make it look like a loan. We say, and if we say this, it's just to indicate to the MPA that they should change the irrational decision. We say, why can't you not say, if you deal with the Mbalula matter, I suggest to you that once there were these questions by the media, you saw the media was catching on to you, and you decided that money had been paid to you, not as a loan, I suggest, you should now suddenly pay back to Mr. Dokrat and Sedgers so as to make it look like a loan. It's a mirror. So in October, in 2 October, and we're saying that 2 October is still our main argument. 2 October, we dealt with the law. We dealt with the definitions of corruption. We dealt with the application of the definitions on the facts that we have in the case docket. In 2 October, we dealt with the deficiencies in the investigation, which we say is deliberate, and we say that the NPA should prosecute because the failure to prosecute is irrational. Having said that, this is our last outreach to the NPA. There's a new national director. We hope there's a new dawn. The national director said this morning that they will act decisively, that they will act quickly. So we really hope that the NPA will take a decision, failure of which we now have the case docket. This is our last outreach. We will develop the law to privately prosecute Mr. Mbalula because we say, and based on our understanding of the case docket, based on our understanding of the law, there's a very good matter made out and that a prosecution should follow. So that is what we want to do. We first have to develop the law, and we will develop the law. So I'll be willing to answer any question based on the law and the case docket and the information we have. But I just want to also then elaborate on what Mr. Van Zyl said, and that is, we've also now this week received the case docket on the criminal injuria matter. Mr. Jacob Pieterse opened a criminal injuria matter against Mr. Mbalula for things that he said about him in a public address. We've now received the case docket back. Now, firstly, we received the case docket back, and unsurprisingly, there was absolutely no investigation done on that case docket. Our statement is in the case docket, and the next moment, the case docket landed up with the prosecutor who decided not to prosecute. There was that's all. We received the case docket, and that's all that in the case docket. So that brings us to a nolle prosecute about criminal injuria to case number 2. The first case was I've forgotten his name, Gade. Mr. Gade in the Eastern Cape, who made allegations against Mr. Pieterse. There was a nolle there. We're in possession of the case docket. We're considering private prosecution. Now we have Mr. Mbalula's case docket. We consider private prosecution. There's one other outstanding, and that's the case docket against Mr. Malema. We are waiting the NPA to finalize the investigation. I just want to indicate to elaborate on what Mr. Van Zyl said. Mr. Mbalula, in a public speech, said the following about Mr. Jacob Pieterse. He said, it is moral indictment of our society that predators still find a refuge in institutions meant to safeguard children, meaning the school. Even more disgraceful is the involvement of organizations like AfriForum, who shield suspects rather than standing for justice. He continued by saying, you see, When a person is sick, a rape is 7 years over 7 years old. It's not a question of consciousness that you need to convert this person. It's an animal. There's nothing you can do about that. It's not a person who can rape a 7-year-old. That's not a human being. That is why we say AfriForum goes and defends such people. Animals, raping 7 years old, I mean, that is even beyond animals. I don't know. It's cannibalism. I read Mr. Mbalula's threatening letter with pleasure, indicating that he has indicted himself on the allegations he made, that he warned us not to make today. So we will be pursuing both these matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Advocate Nel. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
Good morning, Zineko Mhlaba from Newsroom Africa. Advocate Nel, you are stating that the NPA has not been coming to the party in terms of showing some attitude to take action against Mr. Mbalula. Why are you still trying to convince the NPA through your means and the submissions you've made? What will be your response if someone says that maybe there's just no case at all in the first place? So I'm trying to get why you still go in the NPA route. If you do have the capacity to prosecute him privately, why have you been delayed?
Mr. Mhlaba.
Yes.
Mr. Mhlaba, it's a very good question. And the answer to that is to enable us to get a knowledge prosecutor certificate, we have to ensure that the NPA has taken a rational decision. To prosecute corruption in this country by means of private prosecution needs development of the law. Because we have to develop the law, we have to tick every box before we develop the law. And this is the last box we want to tick. The last box is to say, you're irrational. This is the law, apply the law. Because as you know, Mr. Mhlaba, and as other accused people have learned, once we privately prosecute, there will be an application for cost. So we have to make sure that we act reasonably before we take the next step. To answer your question, clearly, we develop the law, we have to tick all the boxes before we develop the law to ensure that corruption is a matter that we can privately prosecute. We think it's a brilliant matter to develop the law. Good facts make for good law, and we think this matter qualifies.
If I may just add, I think as an organization, we want the criminal justice system to work. And we also want to give people a chance. And we now have a new director, and we want to give him a chance also to make sure and give him a chance to move the National Prosecuting Authority into another direction where nobody is above the law. And I think this last instance is also an opportunity for him to show that there's real change in the National Prosecuting Authority to make sure that we tackle issues when there are serious allegations like these against Mr. Mbalula, that the new NPA, if I can call it, and the new leadership will have a different stance and hold people accountable.
You had a follow-up question, Mr. Mhlaba.
Yes, please. On the issue of taking the information you're presenting to the media today to the US, Mr. Cleary made mention of the fact that, this is the information that can be used, if I understand you correctly, by the US to take any action against politicians in South Africa, such as Mbalula. I want to find out from that point of view, why would you take such an action or encourage such action against a political figure, not necessarily government officials such as the president and the Minister of DECO or international relations?
Advocate, you can sit like that. Can you? I presume you would be able to hear what I'm saying here. I think we must also firstly understand the structure of AfriForum. We have on the one side, AfriForum as an activist part in which we say in terms of the ANC's balance of forces ideology, we have to, through various methods, put pressure to make sure that justice prevails and that the interest of the country is being served. Then we have the other part of the private prosecution unit, which we are very careful not to involve in the activist part of what we are doing. The reason why the private prosecution unit was formed is that we found that the NPA no longer prosecuted without fear, favour or prejudice. And when Advocate Nel came to accepted our offer, our agreement was that he would focus on prosecuting locally without fear, favour or prejudice. And that is the reason why that question, I will answer it, because this unit cannot get involved in terms of what's happening internationally. Why are we doing this? We are doing this for the benefit of South Africa and its people. We know what the implications would be of further punitive measures by the United States against the country. We try to avert that by trying to find solutions to this international friction that we are seeing. But if these efforts are being sabotaged, as Mr. Mbalula is doing, the country will bear the brunt of his reckless behavior. And then we would say, well, if you're going to act against somebody, we would say we have to provide an alternative. And that alternative is, if you're angry with people insulting you, don't punish all of us, because everybody in this room will be negatively affected. Rather punish that person that's responsible for this. And that is our call. It's actually a last resort, because we tried through discussions, also with the ANC, to say, let's try and find a solution. But it seems like Mr. Mbalula is hell-bent, for the benefit of his own aspirations to become the leader of the ANC, for that short-term gain, to harm the country. And that is why we are taking a stance. If we ask the US to act against Mr. Mbalula, it's an act of loyalty to the people of this country, because we're trying to avert them being punished for this stupidity that we see from Mr. Mbalula.
There's a question at the back.
Hallo julle, Mariska Koetser from The Citizen. I just want to find out, a few months ago, AfriForum released the Malema dossier. Do we have any feedback on how that's going, please?
Yes, well, we gave that dossier to the US government, the embassy locally. We also handed it in to the State Department when one of our colleagues visited Washington. But of course, the question, if it's going to happen, is something for the US to do. We don't prescribe to them what they should do. We make, we say what we think should happen. And there's, of course, in terms of Magnitsky, it doesn't happen overnight. There's a long process that needs to be followed in that regard. And I think in terms of one of the asks, what we are seeing from the US, as the ambassador mentioned, is that in South Africa we have to see the government condemning the kill the boer, kill the farmer chant. At this stage, it seems that government is still refusing to do that. And now this is an alternative method to take a strong stance against this hateful chant, is to take punitive measures against somebody that makes themselves guilty of that. So I'm still hopeful that there would be progress with regard to the Julius Malema dossier, but where it stands now, I unfortunately don't have specific details. Any other questions?
If I can ask a question privately,
Yes. No, we will be available now. If I'm correct, Advocate Nell will also be available for interviews. Yes, sir.
Sorry, man. I also made mention of the fact that you are in negotiations with the US now. Can you further explain what is that in regard? Is it between trying to solve the relations or tensions between the two countries, and how is that going? And does that mean you've taken a different position now on the issue between South Africa and the USA? Because initially you seemed to be very clear, and you were clear with being in opposition to the country's position on that US issue. So if you now change your mind, what's the approach now? What's the attitude of the current negotiations they're having with the US?
No, our attitude has been the same all along. The reason why people might think otherwise is because of false propaganda by the likes of Mr. Fikile Mbalula. Maybe I should just give you a timeline what happened. On the 20th of December in 2024, President Ramaphosa signed the Expropriation Act. He did not tell the country. Only on the 23rd of January last year, 2025, did he make public that he signed the Expropriation Act. He did not inform the ministers in his government of national unity, even Minister McPherson, under whose department it falls. And then what happened, if you take the timeline from 23 January to the 2nd of February, when President Trump made his statement on Truth Social, it's 10 days. And then President Trump took on the issue of disrespect for property rights in the country. So there's a direct correlation. AfriForum was not involved in that process. When we became involved was on the 3rd of February last year. The ANC sent out a statement, and they even put our name in the beginning of the heading, say AfriForum disinformation. And that, of course, is a clear effort to try and avert taking responsibility for the negative consequences of their own behavior. They had to get a scapegoat. Then in the timeline, a few weeks later, AfriForum and our colleagues of the Solidarity Movement went to the US. And you can go and look at the Washington Memorandum we tabled openly in that time. And it states quite clearly, do not punish South Africa. That was the reason for us going, because we saw the punitive members in the social media post by President Trump. And that was our goal, to say, try and solve this. Let us help to get a solution, because the normal people in this country are going to be harmed. And of course, we were willing to help with that. So that was our stance then. It is our stance now. And we have continued with those negotiations. And that is why this is so serious. This is a serious issue with regard to what Mr. Mbalula did over the last week or so. Because we believe a solution is possible. A solution also in the interest of the South African people. It is possible with the South African government that there can be an agreement. We are willing to participate in getting such an agreement. We are working quite hard on that. And then you have somebody like Mr. Mbalula just sabotaging the whole process from the side. And that is why we are also taking a strong stance against in this regard. If the US is going to be angered at what Mr. Mbalula said over the weekend, don't punish us. So our stance has been the same all along. Yes.
Turkmen Terzi representing Turkish Unity. ANC SG Mbalula said he has not been approached by you. So are you going to request a meeting with him to explain your accusation about him?
As far as approaching Mr. Mbalula is concerned, I mean, on behalf of the prosecution unit, we have no duty, obligation whatsoever. We're not allowed to, because we say that there should be action taken against him, that we say that he's a suspect in a matter. So we're not even allowed to talk to him in terms of this matter. So as far as the prosecution is concerned, what we shared with you today is letters we're written and our views about the prosecution, but we have no obligation. We're not allowed to engage with a suspect in a matter before we make any announcement. So we can, but we've seen what he said, but we didn't understand it.
Tavisabolo from UWA. My question is for Mr. Nel. I think Mr. Nel, obviously, by any objective reading of this matter, the Dubai trip, as even the public prosecutor found, it's a clear conflict of interest in terms of how it was funded by obviously a supplier to the government. But just maybe in terms of maybe your understanding and your experience, just maybe how easy or difficult is it to try and get like a conviction in terms of cases like this, where there is some gratification to a government official from someone who's a service provider to a government? Is it an easy case? Because I think there is obviously a reason why the NPA declined to prosecute. Maybe it could, maybe it couldn't, prove the corruption. Is conflict of interest reaches that threshold that someone can be convicted in a court?
I really appreciate questions on the law, so I can deal with that. You won't believe me, but I'm going to say the following. I think it's an uncomplicated matter. I really do. I think it's an uncomplicated matter. We set it out in our letters that it's uncomplicated. Once you have a minister, you have a supplier, and you have an undue benefit, I say that that is a very strong case to prosecute. And I want to repeat it, and really, it's in case law. The definition of corruption, if it's properly applied, will make all these prosecutions so easy. If you receive or ask for a benefit, and that creates a dynamic whereby whereby I'll be indebted to do you favors forever. That's it. No quid pro quo, nothing else, just that. Now, I apologize, I didn't catch your name, but if you apply that definition on this matter, and you take one step further and you apply the Judge Mlanga's view on a loan, then you're there. But there's one aspect that I haven't addressed. In terms of the act, a loan is also an undue benefit. Because you and I, if we need money, where will we go? We have to go to a bank or some institution. So, but that's a stranger thing, and we address it in our 2 October letter. A loan in itself is an undue benefit. And if it's a loan from a supplier, makes it even worse. So my answer to your question is, this is an uncomplicated prosecution. If the suspect in this instance was Nel, I'm convinced he would have been prosecuted.
Another question there.
Yes, ma'am.
Zara Groenewald, SABC. This is just surrounding the request for individual sanctions to be placed on Mr. Mbalula. I know that AfriForum has been advocating for sanctions to be placed on individuals since last year and prior. Have those conversations focusing on Mr. Mbalula already begun with the US? And how have they been received?
Well, those things we cannot discuss publicly. We have met with representatives of the US government, but I'm not at liberty to give more information. Any other questions? Okay. As I've said, we are available. To the rest of you going home, have a safe trip.
Thank you.
Or not home to work. I know you're hard-working people.
Matthew Sposa, thank you so very much for giving us your time here on Checkpoint. We really do appreciate it. I've been extremely worried about the youth of this country because I think of myself when I was their age and that era. There was so much hope because of the many sacrifices that you and many others made to build a new South Africa. I think people forget because the ANC is such a mess now and has led us down the wrong path.
Your question is extremely important and relevant to where we are in our history. Where people talk easily about the Gen Zs and the Gen Downs. And I'm saying that we owe them a lot. We owe them hope. The hope which we talk about in our Constitution, where we open the Constitution by saying South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white, where we're saying and promising a better life. The questions which arise quickly are, is there a better life for them? Is there hope for them? The answer to both is no, unless they intervene themselves, like they intervene in Madagascar, like they try and intervene now and then in other countries.
But do we want upheaval? Do we want mass demonstrations? Do we want a revolution? Or can some of these problems just be solved by people doing their work?
Well, the red lights lie and facing us daily. The red light is us who are messing up, who are destroying that hope we're talking about. The red lights are around lack of service delivery. They want good schools, they don't have. They want good hospitals, they don't have. They want safety, they don't have. And I was watching TV, one councillor screaming at the Minister of Police, saying, where is the army? She's not saying, where is the police? She says, where is the army? Which means she's lost confidence in the police.
Given up on the police.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah, and then I'll come back to some of the things which makes people lose confidence in the police. But it's not only them, it's the politicians. You have leaders there who we all know from Zondo Commission have been pointed out as being out of order.
They are still there.
They are in cabinet. They are sitting in cabinet. The Smith is a sacrificial lamb. You know, I spoke to Smith, the guy who investigated Smith's case, and I know what he was saying, what happened there. There are many people who should be in the same crawl and go into the same cell with him, who are still in cabinet. That's the problem. And that destroys confidence in government, and in particular in political parties, and in further particular in the ANC. You have a situation where you need a refresher of leadership with a new view towards how to handle those issues which I've outlined. The other heart of it, the big elephant in the room, is corruption. Why are people not listening to the Bible which says, you shall eat from the sweat of our forehead? Those are the words which we address to Adam and Eve. They say we shall steal from the budget, from the treasurer. They twist this thing. So we shall steal for ourselves, for our families, for our friends, from our matalas.
Do you think Cyril will finish his term?
I wish him well. You know, I'm not one to wish anybody bad. I wish him well. But if Cyril does not finish his term, the ANC can go into many zigzags of not knowing where it is going. I prefer a scenario like him staying there,